We are thrilled today to have our second meet and greet for the 2025-2026 Trachtenberg School Executive in Residence. I am excited to have Nish Acharya join us today, who is a Trachtenberg alum and MPA from 2001. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Equal Innovation, a visiting scholar with the Atlantic Council, co-chair of the Education Brain Trust, at X Prize and contributor at Forbes. I am confident he is going to have some amazing insights for us today. So we will record the Q&A, and then from there we will end the recording and open it up to questions. So thank you so much, Nice, for sharing your insights with us today. We're going to first ask you to just provide a 2 to 3 minute introduction about your career work, your career path, and your current work. So turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Denise, and thank you, GW, for allowing me to do this entrepreneur in residence. It's always fun to engage with the institution you are a part of. And because I live in the Boston area and I don't get to spend time on campus, this is a great way to engage as well. So thank you for that opportunity. So a little bit about my background. I've actually had a couple of different careers, and they've had some threads that have sort of been in common throughout those different stages of my career. But I've really enjoyed, wandering from the policy world to the nonprofit philanthropy and now to the innovation space over the last 3 decades or so. So as background, I grew up in the Boston area. Actually grew up in this home that I bought later from my parents, and went to graduate from high school in the Boston area, went to Northeastern University for undergrad, then came to Washington, D.C., like so many young people, on an internship and stayed for several years. I was very lucky to serve in the Clinton administration at the White House, at the reelection headquarters, at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and with the Secretary of Education. And as folks may know who are in Washington, there's two different career tracks in the government space. There's sort of the political communications, events, outreach track, which I did a little bit of. And then there's the policy political role where you're really devising policy in a quick timeline. And so I did that more at the Department of Education and USAID. Really enjoyed my time there. I did my master's while I was in the Clinton administration at GW. And so I'd work at the USAID offices on 14th Street, and I'd hustle over at 5:50 to 6 o'clock for my grad school classes, and then oftentimes hustle back to AID for work or actually get some studying done. And so it was a very, very crazy time in my life, but that when you're in your mid-20s, that you can do that kind of, you have the energy for that sort of thing. And so I really enjoyed my time thinking about I did a master's in public administration, and the theory and the frameworks that GW was providing, I was living in real time at USAID, and vice versa. I was thinking about what about the theory is not relevant to my work at AID, what's not relevant to the politics, and then what is helping me think about governance in a framework that maybe the day-to-day of government really isn't helpful. At the end of the Clinton administration, I decided to move back to Boston, and there's two reasons for that. One is I really thought there were some opportunities back home that were interesting in the nonprofit space. And I also felt that one of the challenges with government is you don't really have a lot of frames of reference, particularly when you're young, other than your own experience. So I remember sitting in the office of the Secretary of Education thinking, what do I know about schools other than my nice suburban district outside of Boston? I don't know anything. And so who am I to make any sort of education policy? And so that brought me back to the Boston area. I ran some nonprofits that were domestically focused in education, in entrepreneurship, and in tech skills development. I then ran a charitable foundation, the Deshpande Foundation, for 7 years. And that was really an interesting pivot point in my career because we were philanthropy and we did grants to nonprofits. But the family I worked for really was looking at the role of philanthropy in sparking innovation and transformative change. And if you look at America, we've historically welcomed immigrants from all over the world, and most of them don't come with a lot of money or professional networks or anything. They come with sort of intelligence or hard work or some skills. And so many of our I think it's 40% of our Fortune 500 companies were started by an immigrant. And in the tech sector, it's been so many more who've been in the founding team. And so they really felt like philanthropy should really create the base for that sort of success because it's really pure work ethic, intelligence, access to capital, those sorts of things. And so we did a lot of work in India and in New England around the role of innovation and entrepreneurship to solve social challenges and also to revitalize regional economic development initiatives. And so, again, if you're looking at how to feed the world, what are some innovations in crop yield? What are some innovations in water technology? And then how do you work with the nonprofit sector to put those in the field? Or domestically, how do you revitalize old industrial cities in the Northeast that have beautiful, massive buildings and are on rivers? And how do you connect them to economic opportunities? And so I did that for several years, and then came back down and worked in the Obama administration as President Obama's Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And that was, again, more domestic focused, but that was really looking at the fact that the American economy has changed. And when you're looking at job creation, it's really around new technology and new opportunities and new industries. Everybody's talking about AI now. At that point, it was, genetics and other things. And that, America's economic development strategy should include entrepreneurship alongside buildings and infrastructure and workforce development. It should include innovation. It should include entrepreneurship. And so I helped the administration set up several programs in that space to help leverage the federal government's resources for better economic development. And I would say some of it was successful and continued into the Trump administration, then the Biden administration, and then some of it didn't work, and rightfully so, it was pivoted. After I left the Obama administration, I decided to start Equal Innovation as a consulting firm. I did some other things too, what I jokingly call my first midlife crisis. But I came back and started Equal Innovation, and we were really looking at solving these two problems from the intermediary side. One was how do you support entrepreneurs that are not in the East Coast or the West Coast? How do you help somebody out of the University of Michigan or the University of Minnesota or University of Alabama, if they have an innovative technology, how do you help them to grow their company and stay where they are and not have to move to DC, Boston, San Francisco? Because then you can create local jobs in those areas that are sometimes doing well, sometimes not. And then the second was how do we support innovation addressing real global challenges in climate change or global health or education? And how do we do all that together to really move solutions forward? And a good example of this is actually with COVID, philanthropy governments did a lot to support the citizenry when it happened with masks and food and subsidies and loans and all of that stuff. But it was the vaccine that got us back to normal. And so the vaccine is a scientific innovation that then combined with good policy and the support of government and nonprofits and all was really able to be accessible to a lot of people. And so with Equal Innovation, we're looking at why can't we do that again and again with climate change or education or disinformation on the internet or any of those topics? Like how do we move society forward using innovation and the right partnerships with the government, philanthropy, nonprofits, all of that. And so that's been our work. We work with a lot of foundations, a lot of large nonprofits, government agencies. We've been working with the G20 on global policy in this space, and really doing some interesting stuff. And I think it's a great space for young people because they're interested in startups and technology, but they're also trying to make the world a better place. And I think we're trying to find the nice fit that matches up all of that.
So you've been a little busy.
A little bit, yeah.
It's amazing, amazing to hear. You've started to touch on this, but kind of focusing more on the leadership side is, have there been some real pivotal moments in your career where you felt like this really shaped your leadership?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think I'll give a couple of examples. I think one was at the end of the Clinton administration. It was just the beginning of the internet era. So many of the students will not know what I'm talking about, but we were just getting online. And, I saw an opportunity there, me and some other colleagues at USAID, to really first move the agency online and be one of the first agencies online to accept donations, to sort of create communities where they could share information about what might be going on in a natural disaster. It was Hurricane Mitch at that point. It hit the Central America and created a lot of devastation. And so, using the internet's very early platforms for communication and email marketing and public service and all that stuff. And that was amazing because the federal government is enormous. And I was 24 years old and I had no authority, no mandate, nothing, but I was still able to affect change. And I was able to say, okay, here's something new that's going on, and it could be really helpful for our mission. Let's just run with it and do something. And I learned that you can go really pretty far without resources, and get a lot done and convince people about something important. And so that was one in government, or very early in my career that I think was a leadership moment. The second was when I was at the Deshpande Foundation, and we pushed forward this concept of innovation for the nonprofit sector, which at the time was very new, and people didn't weren't quite sure what it meant, what it was. But we supported a school lunch program in India that actually serves 2 million kids a day now. It's a nonprofit, largest nonprofit in the world in terms of daily services provided. That's over 2 billion meals a year, with a B. And so just crazy. And they were able to scale from one kitchen, 100,000 when we got involved, to about a million when I left the Deshpande Foundation. And so they were scaling just like you'd think about a Google or a Facebook or a Tesla. They were scaling and serving more children and providing nutritious meals. And so being able to be a part of that journey, and I always say I was the funder. I didn't actually do the feeding, they did it. But to be part of that journey, and particularly to share that journey in the United States with the funder community, with the nonprofit, with the media, to say, hey, look, we can scale social challenges, solutions to social challenges in the same way that we do other things. I think that was a great leadership moment for me as well. And I'll stop there for now. But I think that's two that really stand out as things I did when I was younger.
That's great. I love that. On the flip side, how have you navigated challenges or setbacks in your career? And what advice would you give for overcoming them? And I would really put an emphasis on I like when our EIRs give really pragmatic advice on
Mhm.
things that were real and how you overcame things.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of setbacks along the way. I think a couple of things come to mind. One is, and it's hard to do this, but the path will never be what you think it'll be, right? There's the famous Mike Tyson quote, your plan is great until you get punched in the mouth. And so it's essentially that way in all of life, right? That you make a great plan. I'm going to go to GW. I'm going to get a job in Washington. I'm going to work my way up the ranks, and then all of a sudden the power changes to the party you're not a part of, and they have very different plans, and there's no space for you, and you move somewhere else. So I think understanding that it's almost impossible to have a straight life path that will go exactly where you want it to go. I think that realization is really important. And I think I faced that several times in Washington where I was first at an agency where I actually didn't like the people I was with very much, but I was so young, I didn't know I had a choice to move around. And I had to struggle through while I found my footing, and then, moved on to another place where I was happier. And so I think understanding, sort of where do I want to get to, and being patient to get there was one of the biggest things to overcome. And I think the second um, is constantly learning. I think when your degree is done, that doesn't mean the learning is done. And I think for me, the example of the internet was just that. Like, I'm not a tech person. I did public administration, political science, but the internet was coming. I needed to learn about it. I needed to understand where the world was going if I was going to be a policymaker and have any relevance. And so I think always thinking and learning ahead is a big thing. For example, right now I'm knee deep in learning about large language models. And again, I have no background in this tech space, but that's the way the world is going. And education is going to be influenced significantly by that space. And so in our work now, where we work with foundations that are interested in education, that I have to know what's going on. And so I think overcoming, being able to predict and move to the next thing is such an important part of overcoming challenges in this world. And the last thing I'll say on a personal note, I think strong personal relationships are very important, whether that's a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, that's parents, that's close friends, however you define a close personal relationships that you can rely on to help you through transitions and difficult times. That's the most important thing I think to keeping going whenever there's a transition.
Wonderful. I'm loving this great advice. Two more questions. What do you think differentiates you as a leader? And, has that evolved? Have there been factors that have impacted how you're differentiated as a leader?
Sure. So I think I've differentiated myself as a leader in really, I think, two ways. The first is I think to be a leader, you have to have a certain level of expertise in a in usually in a narrow, for most people, in a narrow area of activity, right? So there's some people who become senators or governors or CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. They have broad expertise in a lot of areas. For most of the rest of us, being a leader is really having that expertise in your swim lane, if you will. And so for me, it's been the intersection of innovation and the nonprofit philanthropic government space. That's where I was able to build my career. And even when I was doing different things, sort of stayed close to that space and kept up the expertise, kept looking at the next thing that was relevant. And so I think that's differentiated me. And I look at a lot of my colleagues who I started with, and some of them have done great things, but in terms of leadership and moving a space forward and that sort of thing, I think that having that consistent focus on something and continuing to move that industry in that area has been something that I've been a leader on, and so that's been a very important part of my style. The other thing I think is really the concept of empathy. I think the being an empathetic leader in today's day and age is super critical, and that's not just being nice. I think that's really understanding the professional situation your colleagues and peers are in. We live in a world of work from home. We live in a world where people are all around the world. I have team members in India, Nigeria, the UK, Western United States, Australia now. And so empathy is understanding there's a time zone difference, understanding that they have their challenges, that their work culture is different than ours. It's also obviously working with them to nurture them and build their leadership, and to help them to grow. So I think that as a broad concept, professional and personal empathy has been really, really important. And we all are not always good at it. I think there's been many times I have colleagues who will tell you I was not good at it, but I think I've overall kept a track record of staying close to almost everybody I've worked with in my life, and I think that's comes from being empathetic to whatever it is their situation is.
I love that, particularly knowing what I know about Trachtenberg alumni, that empathetic leadership, I think, is such a core value of people who come through our school and our leaders. So it's wonderful. The last question before we close up this section of it and open up to Q&A is there one leadership lesson you wish you had learned earlier in your career, or one piece of professional advice that someone said to you that's like, this has been a guiding principle?
That's a great question. I think for a lot of high achievers, like our students at GW, I think there is this idea that you're sort of groomed to say, oh, you're so smart, you have access to so much, you're in DC, that you're going to become a leader. And as I mentioned earlier, this idea that there's no standard pathway to leadership, I think I wish people told me and I didn't listen. So I wish there was a way that I could have listened better and understood what that means, that even if I'm not going to be chief of staff to the House Majority Leader, I'm still having huge influence on policy, but it was in a different pathway, and that's okay. So I think that's one of the hardest. I wish I understood that earlier in my career, and I wish I understood, how much hard work is required throughout your life to be a leader and be successful. So, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I'm now 52 and I still work really, really hard and I still work long hours and I enjoy it and it's fine. But, we sort of assume that by a certain age, you'll be doing, 9 to 5 and you'll have a team of assistants and all this other stuff. And I think if you're really trying to achieve change, certainly you can do that if you choose different professions. But if you're trying to achieve change, if you're trying to be a leader, you will always have to work hard. And I think that's not something made as clear to us when we're in college and younger, that just how much that's part of our lives.
I wish I could just take that clip and share that with every single student coming in. And I'm really excited as we wrap up this section and go to Q&A, that you're going to be doing individual networking meetings with our students and alumni, because what you shared overall, but particularly at the end, I think is so critical for people to hear. So I
Right.
thank you so much for this insights and honesty and candor. And